Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July Sales Skills Training webinar being presented by David Hoffeld. As you have seen on RB Academy, this webinar will train on how to improve your sales by delivering a powerful discovery and intent statement. So at this time, let me introduce David Hoffeld.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and thank you to all of you who are joining us today. We are going to talk about, as Wendy mentioned, the discovery and the intent statement. And so we're going to jump into what you see on your screen, the discovery first, because boy, does this matter in the sale. And it's not unique to Remath. For those of you who are listening or watching and you sold other products or services in the past, you know the discovery matters really no matter what you're selling, because it gives us such insight and really shapes the presentation later on and our execution of it. And so we want to talk about that today. What is the discovery and how do we execute it? And what are some best practices and some things we need to do and some things we should never do when executing the discovery? And then we're going to talk about the intent statement, what it is, and how to execute that, because boy, that is a great way to prepare your potential customers for what's going to come up later in the sale. You'll get high levels of compliance with them, and you're less likely to hear the "how much does that cost" question throughout the entire presentation, which can often divert their attention away from what you're talking about and asking you questions that aren't really helpful for them or you. How much does this cost in the inspection? How much does it cost when you talk about Remath? And how do we deal with that? And we address that head on in the intent statement. But before we jump into the discovery and intent statement for the next few seconds, let's recap where we are in the sales process. So remember, with the new Remath sales process, we have had the arrival, right? We've arrived in their home. We stepped in the door, and then we got to a table. We began setting up our computer or laptop and getting ready for the presentation, and we do a quick warm-up, creating some conversation, and building rapport, and really personalizing the encounter. And now, of course, we get into the discovery. So let's talk about that now so that we know where we are in the sales process. This is very early on, prior to inspecting the bathroom. And the question that should always be asked when anytime you talk about a discovery is, what are you trying to accomplish, right? What are you listening for? And then in discovery, we need to focus on understanding a couple things. First is the perspective of our potential customers, right? We need to understand their perspective. In other words, why am I here? So I have not seen the bathroom yet. So we've had some little chit chat. We've talked about the weather or sports or their grandkids or whatever in the warm up. Now I want to get into a discovery, more business centric questions that really first of all, help me uncover, why am I here? Like from their perspective. And this is so useful because oftentimes when we get into the bathroom and we see what's really going on, what you're going to find is what many of you already know is that oftentimes what they told you is different than reality. In other words, they have been living with the problems in their bathroom or the issues for so long that they're oftentimes they become blind to them. For example, many people, and I've seen this myself in running leads, but many people have also shared in this where you go into the home and you say, what is it you're looking to accomplish? And they say, it's just outdated colors. That's really the only concern we have. That's what we want, just to see more modern colors. And then you go into the bathroom and you're like, oh my word. I mean, there's mold everywhere and staining. I mean, you got severe problems here. But those didn't happen overnight. They've happened over years and years, and the client has been blind to them, right? They just ignore them. They block it out, and they go, that's just how bathrooms are, at least mine. And so when their perspective is often skewed. So oftentimes, and we do this really well in the inspection, we position ourselves as an expert by educating them. So we find out what reality is at that point. But what matters, though, is why am I here? Because reality is one thing, but most of us don't live in reality, right? We live in our minds, right? Our perspective, our view of reality is what matters, especially when you're selling. And so I need to understand where the person's at so I can move them to a different place. And it's hard to fight against the unknown. So understanding their perspective is mission critical. And that's not all, though. We also want to get into what our potential customers believe about their bathroom problems, right? And understanding those belief systems. And that's what we deal with a lot in selling, is we're dealing with beliefs. And so where are these people? What is their perspective? What do they think about their bathroom? What are they hoping that you're going to accomplish today? And it's always helpful to understand the psychology behind this at a very high level. They've done something very abnormal. They've invited the salesperson into their home with no inducement, meaning we didn't say, I'm going to bring a box of steaks with me. And so if you let me come into your house, I'll give you these steaks. We didn't say, here's a gift card, right? We didn't do anything. They just freely, of their own free will, with no incentive, invited a salesperson into their home. That is odd behavior. So why did they do that? What are they hoping you can accomplish today? I want to understand that. I also want to begin to start to understand their buying requirements. Now, we address this head-on in the inspection. In fact, one of the most pivotal parts of the new Rebas sales process happens at the end of the inspection with confirming that buying criteria. But we begin that process a little bit right now as far as understanding what they want, meaning for a solution to be right for them, what would it do? Right? Do they have any ideas? And sometimes people will have very strong opinions on this. They might be misguided. They might be incomplete, which is most of the time. But they have, we're looking for this. Okay. So it's helpful for me to know that so I don't say something that contradicts it, or how I can really, if I need to move them, I can move them from where they're at to where I need them to be. And that's hard to do if I don't know where they are right now. And then all of the above as well. So I want to actually open this up to a question. And the question is this: when we're in the discovery, I want to get your opinion on this. Which of these matter the most? Obviously, they all matter. Which of them matters the most? What should you focus on the most? Should I try to understand their perspective? Should I understand their beliefs about their bathroom? Should I focus on their buying requirements? Or all of the above? So, Wendy, how can we have our participants vote on this? Which one of these four is the best answer? They're all good. Which one's the best? How can they vote?
Yep, so you should all see a poll on your screen now. So using your mouse or your finger, click your answer. Once everyone completes their selection, I'll close the poll, and at that time you'll see a recap of the answers, and David will review the results. So it looks like we're just waiting for a few more people to vote. Almost all in. Just a couple more people. All right. So we're going to go ahead and close this poll and review the results. So it looks like, yep, can you see that, David?
I can, yeah. Looks like we got 0 for option 1, perspectives of potential clients. Option 2 got 0. The buying requirements got 21%, and all of the above got 79%. I purposely crafted that question the way I did because I've been asking such easy questions on past webinars, Wendy, and everyone just gets it right, and it's just frustrating. So I got to try to mix it up a little bit so that
you got a smart crowd.
Yeah, I know. They're ahead of the game. We got the smartest people. It's interesting. Yeah, who comes to a webinar? Usually it's not, it's usually the smartest people in the crowd, right? Just the self-select. Interesting stuff. Getting on a tangent, but real quick, they did a study on how parenting books help people with parenting. And it really interesting. They found buying the book, what you learn in the book is secondary. What matters is, do you buy a book? They said people that buy books on parenting are usually better parents than those who don't buy a book. So the fact that buying a book, you're that kind of person who buys a book on parenting, is pretty increases the likelihood that you're actually going to be a good parent. The fact that you bought the book, really interesting stuff. So same with webinars. So congratulations to all of you. Anyway, and most of you were correct. All of the above is the best answer. Their buying requirements certainly does matter. In fact, all three of those things, as I've kind of already mentioned, all of them matter. But that last one, right? All of the above encompasses what really matters, which is they all matter, and we've got to pay attention to all of them. And so what is the discovery? Let's talk about that. The discovery is when salespeople ask buyers a series of questions for the purpose of acquiring a thorough understanding of the buyer's situations and perspective. Like most things in selling, there is a lot of great research on this. Real quickly, an article in the Journal of Personal Selling and Sales Management, one of the few actual journals that deal with sales. There's not many out there that deal with it, which is reflective in most sales training, which is void of any kind of science at all. But this one did, and it talked about discovery. And it talked about that when you do a discovery, meaning you develop an in-depth understanding of your buyers, and that it builds trust. People are more likely to trust you when they feel like you understand their situation, and it's also linked with higher sales. In another journal, a very well-known journal in applied psychology, said acquiring an understanding of the buyer was more predictive of sales success than being a polished presenter. This was really interesting when I thought that understanding the buyer matters more than being an adept presenter. Why is that? Because when you understand the buyer, you're able to customize your approach and really meet their needs. And that matters more if you have to choose. Hopefully you don't. But if you had to choose, that matters more than just being a really good presenter. Now, does being a really good presenter matter? Absolutely. But understanding your buyer matters more. And that's exactly what the discovery does. And so the discovery is really how we're going to begin to understand what our potential customers want and understand their perspective. And what matters also is what we do with this information, right? It's great to understand our buyers, but if all you're doing is getting an understanding of people, it doesn't matter. What do you do with that information? That matters a great deal. And that's what we talk about, right? Just like a good doctor, when you go to the doctor, they don't just walk in and just give you, here's a prescription. No, they want to do a thorough examination of you, ask you a lot of questions. They want to poke and prod and run some tests, and then they come back with it. And because of that, they can customize what they recommend for you, that prescription, and they can explain it to you, and you have a high level of trust. And not just because they're a doctor, because if the doctor came in and didn't ask you any questions and just gave you a prescription, you'd be like, okay, you probably wouldn't trust it. You wouldn't take it. You'd be like, what is this for? I mean, you don't even know what I need. And so we wouldn't trust it. And same is true in selling. And that's often forgot. One data point I'll share with you that's really interesting that I talk about in my book, The Science of Selling, and I've shared a couple of times. Maybe some of you are familiar with it, but it's an alarming one. 88% of buyers that were surveyed, I think it was back in 2015, if I remember correctly, a large group, 88% of them believe the salespeople they work with do not understand their problems enough to be able to solve them. Let me say that again. 88% of buyers believe the salespeople they work with do not understand their problems enough to be able to solve them. They don't understand their perspective. Like 88%. That means only 12% of salespeople in the client's mind are doing a good job. And now look at that as two things. Number one, in what I would say, I'm in sales, right? I'd say, yay, right? That makes me excited. It's so much easier when your competitors are horrible, right, at what they do. And most people are pretty bad at selling. And because they don't come to things like this, right? They don't read the parenting books, right? They don't read the sales books. They're too busy for that. And success eludes them because of it. And so the same is true with this. That's a tremendous opportunity, knowing that the majority of your competitors do not really get an understanding of their buyers. They do not understand their perspectives. They come in and look at the bathroom, make a lot of assumptions, and tell them what they think they need, right? It's very seller-centric. It's here's what I want. Here's what I think. And they ignore the buyer, and that shows up in their sales results. So it's a tremendous opportunity. And we use those primary buying motivator statements. We're not going to get into that today, but it's a statement we use where we connect the dots between what your potential client cares about and what your product or service delivers. So this information we find out in the discovery, we leverage over and over and over again throughout the presentation. So let's get right into it, though. What are the keys to a successful discovery? You want to ask, number one, high-gain introductory questions. I'm going to go over some of those in just a moment. Second, that's not enough. You also want to get into powerful follow-up questions. How do you do that? Those are often challenging the script because I don't know what your buyers are going to say. And that requires some skill on the salesperson's part. And great salespeople ask what we call second level questions. If you're not sure what those are, stay tuned. We're going to talk about them in an upcoming webinar. And in the virtual learning, there is whole courses on them. Very, very powerful questions, and that help you create high gain follow-up questions with ease. So you want to be ready to do that, or at least have the skill. Third, and this can be a tough one for some people, especially underperformers, don't talk about rebirth here. And it's just tempting, right? I mean, someone might say in the discovery, we have such staining in our bathtub and it's so hard to clean. And you want to say, have I got the solution for you? At Rebath, we have a proprietary product called Durabath, and you go into it, or Natural Stone, and you want to start talking about it. Don't do that. Why? Because you're stealing from your presentation. And later on, when you get to that part of the presentation and you present it and you want to get a commitment, you won't be able to, often because they're bored, because you already talked about it. So you don't want to prematurely present Rebath. If you do, it will cost you sales that should be yours. So don't do that. Just trust me on that. This is pretty basic sales 101 stuff, so I won't go into it any more than that. But if you're doing that, trust me and stop. What you want to do is, if they come up with something like that, like staining or hard to clean, you want to make a mental note of it or jot it down on a piece of paper if you can't remember it. And then later on, when you get to that part of the presentation, you're talking about, let's just say, Durabath. You want to say earlier, you mentioned when I first came into your home, you said one of your biggest concerns was the staining in your tub and how it was hard to clean, and they'll nod their head. Well, let me explain our Durabath product and how it's easy to clean and it doesn't stain. And then you go into that, and they're in the palm of your hand, and they're like, that sounds awesome, right? So don't prematurely present ever. Discovery is not an interrogation. So I want to give you a list of questions here in a moment. You don't want to use them like, they're in, like you're a detective and you're interrogating a suspect of a crime, right? And some salespeople will fall into this, where it's very much an interrogation. They hit them with these questions as if they're trying to check the questions off so they can tell their manager, I did it. I got them done. I asked them all. We don't want that. It's never an interrogation. It's a very fluid, dynamic dialogue, right? And we want to engage in what's called effective listening. Real quickly, and this comes up a lot, what is effective listening? I want to talk about this for, give me 30 seconds. We'll go through it real quickly, though I can talk about it for a long period of time because there's so much bad information about listening. Usually, anytime people talk about listening, no one can resist saying the phrase, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we talk. See, it even upsets Wendy. She's coughing about it. It is upsetting. And though that's true, God did give us 2 ears and 1 mouth. I never want to presume to know the mind of God and why he did that. And there are certain times in the sale, though, that we need to listen more than we speak, like right now in the discovery, but there's other times we need to talk more than we listen, like when we're presenting, right? And so it's fluid. What matters, though, in listening is not how much you listen. What really matters is what you're listening for. I'll give you an example of this, a real life example from someone at Rebath that I trained a long, long time ago. This is years ago. And I thought I forgot about this guy, but he's popping in my mind right now, and so I'm going to talk about him. I forget his name. It doesn't really matter. But I remember coaching him, and he would come back, and he didn't get a sale, and I would ask him, well, why? And he would go into, well, tell me about the situation, tell me about the buyer. And he would go into elaborate things about their grandkids and about the, I remember one time he was on a farm with some buyer, and he was talking about the barn. Just detailed information. But whenever I ask him some of the things that really mattered, some of the things we've already discussed about the sale, he was like, well, I didn't get to that. I don't really know. So he knew a lot. I mean, my word, he listened a lot. It was just a lot of irrelevant information. And so my point to him was, who cares? Right? Who cares about that information? What matters is, right, we call them primary buying motivators, like understanding the problem and their perspective and their time frame and how they're going to make a decision. That matters. Not all this stuff about the grandkids and all their barn and how they're painting it. Who cares, man? I don't care about that. What are you here to do, right? You're not here to learn about people. You're here to sell something, right? And so we want to listen for what we're listening for. So make sure you don't get seduced by just listening a lot. Make sure, what do I want to listen for? And we've talked about that. So be very strategic in listening, right? It's purposeful. It's not just to check off that I listen more than I talk. And so be very mindful of that. and evaluate yourself on that. So we talked about what are we going to be listening for? A couple quick things to recap that we haven't discussed, right? I want to know what are the outcomes they want to achieve. I want to know what they think about their problem. I want to know about their buying requirements. I want to know about how they're going to make a decision. I mean, who's involved in this decision process, right? Am I talking to those people? I want to know about time frame. I might even ask about the budget, right? I want to know so I can guide the sales process and I can guide the presentation later on. And knowing this information allows me to truly meet their needs and serve through how I sell, right? So I want to understand this information, and this is what I care about. And this is really all I care about, right? This is what I need to know to be successful in selling. And so that's what you want to focus on. So make sure you don't ever, you listen so much that you forget the big things and listen for these, secondary things, which aren't bad, but they don't matter in selling. They're not enough. It's great to know things about your buyers, but if you miss some of these big areas, boy, it'll cost you sales that really should be yours. So let's get into what are these discovery questions, right, in the new sales process, and we'll talk through them. These are the questions I'd recommend asking on the sales calls. The first one is, people generally remodel their bathroom for numerous reasons. Their bathroom isn't functioning correctly, right? And these are water damage issues. They want to change how their bathroom looks, so more aesthetics, or they want a more accessible bathroom, right? So this deals with a lifestyle change. Of those three options, which are important to you? And people might say, well, yeah, we got problems in our bathroom with water damage, and I don't like how it looks. So the first two you mentioned, right? Or they might say, no, we need like a walk-in tub. So we're looking at more of that third option, more accessible. We have some issues with that. I have a hard time getting in and out of my tub, right? So regardless of what it is, I kind of understand from their perspective a lay of the land. And this is so important that we do this prior to going in the bathroom so we can really understand their perspective before you get your perspective once you see the bathroom. Next, we want to ask them, how long have they been thinking about remodeling their bathroom, right? And why does this matter? Is this recent? They go, well, it's just been recently. Oh, I want to find out why, right? Can I ask what prompted you to begin to think about it then? Oh, we had, and then they tell you, or we've been thinking about this for years, ever since we bought this house. Oh, okay. How long ago was that? Well, that was about 7 years ago. So it's been on the list for 7 years. Yeah. Can I ask why you chose now to address it? Well, right. These are all second level questions, right? These are follow-up questions, but they flow very naturally. So these are great introductory questions that I can understand their perspective, right? And so, like we talked about, you want to ask these, but you want to have second level questions. And if you're not sure how to do that, check out the vast amount of training we have on this where you can go through it and learn it. And a couple here, I do give a couple follow-up questions here, but let's get into some of these additional discovery questions. How did you find out about Remath, right? A great thing to ask, not only so that you can convey back to leadership on how the marketing is working, if they didn't already know when they sent the lead, but it also can give you a wealth of information. Was it a home show? Was it a Home Depot lead? Wasn't they just stopped by the showroom, right? All of those are ripe with follow-up questions. So, oh, I stopped by the showroom. Oh, I just saw it driving by from work and I stopped by. Oh, so what did you look at when you're in the showroom? Oh, I really liked your natural stone. Okay. What is it about the natural stone that kind of appealed to you? Well, right? And so I'm finding out that perspective. How long have you owned this home? This helps you do a number of things. Do they own the home, right? You want to make sure that you're talking to the homeowners, which oftentimes you are. If not, that's a lead setting issue. But they go, well, we've owned it now for a couple years. And a great follow-up question, how many years do you plan on staying in this home? Less than a year. We want to move. Okay, so now I'm talking to someone that wants to move, right? And what do I do for that? I'm always amazed at how many people, when they're ready to move, come to Remath to remodel their bathroom. I'll share with you later on some of the reasons why, but that's really a common thing. Oh, really? Right? And so that primes me for later on in the presentation. Or if they say, oh, we're going to live here for another at least 10, 20 years. Okay, right? Either way, I'm going to use that information later on in a number of ways and a number of areas. This is really important information. Then the next question is one that people are often a little reluctant to ask. I still think it's a great question to ask, which is, do you have a budget set aside for this project? Oftentimes people do not, or they won't tell you at this point. They're like, nah, not really. We're just kind of looking around. Oh, okay. Or sometimes they will. They'll say, yeah, we have $500 budget. I mean, about 20 years ago, we remodeled this and it cost like $400. So with inflation, $500. And then you can, then you go, okay, we got some issues now. I got to deal with that. But again, it's hard to fight against the unknown. So I want to ask this. If I get something, great. If not, that's fine too. What is helpful, and you're more likely to get an honest answer if you make this question one of the last that you ask in this sequence, right? Because we've already created a norm of behavior. What I mean by that is I ask questions, you answer. I ask questions, you answer. I ask questions, you answer. People fall into this pattern. And so when I ask a question, then like a budget, if I ask it later on in the sequence, well, the pattern is they answer. And so they're more likely to give me actually a real, honest answer. And then another question I'd recommend is, have you sought any other professional advice regarding your bathroom? If yes, what was the result? Like, yeah, we had a contractor come out yesterday. Great. I don't want to let that sit there, right? I'm like, oh, how did that go? Went really good. We liked a lot of what he said, but there were some things we didn't like. I'm not going to let that sit there either, right? I'm a salesperson. I want to find, well, great. I'm curious. What is it you liked? Well, we liked this and that. He's been around for a long period of time. Seemed like a nice guy. Had a bunch of people he's done work for in the area. Oh, okay. And you mentioned some things you weren't too pleased with. Can I ask what those were? Well, yeah, right. And we told him we weren't going to do it because, well, this, and that. And right now, you just found out what the objections are probably going to be for you if you don't address them, right? It'll be this, and that. So really powerful information. Again, you can use those follow-up questions for. And another great question I would always recommend asking is, what qualities do you look for when hiring someone or a company to do work in your home? People will say things like trustworthy, doesn't they say they're going to do. We're going to leverage that in the presentation later on, specifically on that Better Business Bureau slide in your digital presentation under the REMAX section, when we bring that back up and we address it head on. So there's a very clear, obvious place that we leverage what we learned in Discovery to help get that commitment to REMAX. And then another question I would ask when you think about remodeling your bathroom, what specific things are important to you? So what I would do as far as practicing this is what you see on the screen right now. Those are all the questions we just reviewed. I would, if you're not skilled at those and asking second level questions, I would practice them. Couple recommendations on that. Number one, work with a team member, right? He or she is the homeowner, you're the salesperson, you go through and making sure you're asking relevant second level questions, follow-up questions. So you're not just running through these, but you're really having this dialogue where you're helping to really understand the buyer. Another way, if you don't have someone you can practice with, is practice on your own. Practice them and think about, what are some possible answers or what are some answers you've heard in the past, and then practice asking second level questions, just kind of like I just did a moment ago. So if they say, let's see, where's one? Have you sought any other professional advice regarding your bathroom? And they say, yes, a contractor came out a couple of days ago. What question would you ask? Well, I would ask this, right? And so going through it in your mind like that and practicing it. And practice is not reading over these. Practice is performing them out loud and without notes, right? So you might need notes at first, but eventually you don't want to use notes. And so you want to practice this, knowing that when I tell people to practice things, most of them don't do it. So that excites me. If I was in sales, because I'm like, great, most people aren't working hard. I'm going to. That gives me an unfair advantage, right? Because they're busy. They're watching movies. They're watching TV. They're going out having fun. Great, I'm going to work. So that way I'll be more successful than them and I'll experience all those things, but much more deeply later on, right? And so adopt that. Most people, I'm telling you right now, when I give them an exercise like this, they go, okay, that sounds good. I'll get to that later. And they never do it. Right. So what that does is present an opportunity. So be that person who says, I'm going to do it. Because right there, and the fact that you showed up for this webinar and the fact that you're going to do the exercise separates you from like 95% of the salespeople in REMAX. So give yourself a pat on the back. Success is not far away. Right. And so be different. You got to be abnormal among normal people. Right. And then eventually you want to be abnormal among abnormal people. And that's when things really get exciting. So don't be normal. I'm telling you, normal is you do nothing on this slide, right? You move on with your life as if I've said nothing. So don't do that. I'm telling you, and I'm telling you right now, the people on this right now, most of them will never do it. So therefore, be the one to do it and watch what happens, right? Do those little things every day that set you apart from the crowd, and you'll experience different results from the crowd will. So I hope that excites you. I love neglect in sales when I'm selling. I love that my competitors are neglecting, or people I'm comparing myself to are neglecting areas, because that just makes me want to do it even more, because then I'll experience a success that they're too lazy to get. And that's most of success in selling, is just how hard you're willing to work, right? So take this one seriously. I want to open it up to some questions in a minute, but before I do, let's talk about that intent statement as well. Almost forgot about that, right? The discovery is so much fun. Let's go through this real quickly. What is the intent statement? It's a transitioning statement after the discovery, which explains and obtains agreement from prospects to the agenda of the sales call, right? So I'm done the discovery. What do I do now? An intent statement. Here's why. It transitions the sales call. This begins to set you up now for everything else you're going to do, and it lets them know what's going to happen. It conveys your professionalism, right? This is what you do at high-level business meetings. You say, here's the agenda. Does anyone want to add anything to the agenda? No. Okay. And you go through it, right? People are busy, and especially at very high levels, they don't just come to meetings because they're busy. And when they're doing a meeting, they're not doing other things they should be doing. So it's got to be worth their while. And so you let them know what's going to happen. So it instantly sets you apart from most of the sloppy salespeople that you're competing with. Third, it previews value. For those individuals who you meet with, and this happens oftentimes at no fault of your own, where they're like, they want to check on the game or check on the kids or check on dinner. Why shouldn't they? Why should they stick around for the presentation? I mean, what value are you going to give them? This previews that and increases compliance rates significantly. Fourth, it reduces apprehension. This matters a lot too. Like, what's going to happen during the call today, right? People want to know. And if they don't know, they'll often start asking you stupid questions, right? Like, okay, what do you guys do? Because they don't know when you're going to cover that. Or how much will this cost? Because they don't know when you're going to cover costs. Or like, can you compare yourself to like the contractor we talked to, right? They start interrupting the process and prematurely asking these questions because they don't know what you're going to do. And so when you let them know the plan for the day, it puts their mind at ease, and they often don't need to ask you that, right? They don't need to barrage you in the inspection of how much would it cost if you guys did these walls. Why? Because in the intent statement, you tell them when costs will be discussed. You tell them when that'll happen, and so now they don't feel the need to keep asking, because they know, oh yeah, you're going to get to that after these things have occurred. So very powerful, and it also controls the sale uh, entirely. Like, you're setting the agenda. So that way they're going to comply with what's going to happen and when price will be given. And what you'll find is you'll have much higher compliance rates with the sales call, meaning people will stick around and not try to take over the sales process, right? You always have those people who, if you don't do this, they will try to take over the sales process, right? They're like type A, and they're like, okay, well, if you don't have a plan, I do. And so they'll just do it. And they'll keep asking you questions and trying to veer you off and say, you can skip this. I already know all this. Let's just get to that, right? Those kind of people. The intent statement will minimize those responses, and it's quite, quite powerful. So it's a big idea. People that use the intent statement, it always improves sales outcomes. So highly recommended that you do that. Real quickly, the intent statement, what is it? It starts with a transition statement. Then we go into the agenda, and then we go into agreement question where we actually get buy-in to our customers. So what does this sound like on a real sales call? It sounds like this. Our customers have told us over time that when they initially contacted us, there were some things that were important to them. They wanted to know, right? So I grabbed their attention, leveraging social proof. Our customers over time told us there were some things that were important to them. They wanted to know about the person they were talking to, about the company they were dealing with, the different options for remodeling their bathroom, and which would be best for them, and finally, what it all cost. And oftentimes when you say that last one, people will nod their head and go, yeah, that one, right? Because each of these they care about, in reverse order, right? Number 4, then number 3, and number 2, and number 1. So they're like, yeah, that one. And so you go, I agree, all those are important. So let me address each of those right now. And you go into it. My name is David Huffeld, and I've been working with Rebath for quite some time. I have seen hundreds of bathrooms. I work for a locally owned and operated franchise that is part of the Rebath National Network that's been around since 1979. Rebath is the largest bathroom remodeler in the world and has remodeled over 1 million bathrooms. In just a minute, we will all, key phrase there, I want everyone to go into that inspection. So I'm going to prime them for, I'm going to create what's called a social norm. We will all go. So in just a minute, what's going to happen? We're all going to go into the bathroom. And you can tell me what you like and dislike. And of course, I'll do a thorough inspection. After that, we'll come back out to this table and I'll lay out for you all your options, including the rebath experience. Then we'll design your new bathroom. I have many different samples and photos for you to view. And once we've designed your new bathroom, I'll price it out to the penny. So you will not receive an estimate, but a firm to the penny price. Sound good? And they'll go, almost always, that sounds great. Yeah. And do you have any questions before we all go into the bathroom? No. Okay, let's all go take a look at your bathroom. So notice the what's in bold there. We're all 3 times, right? I want to prepare them so that I can minimize the idea that, well, you guys go ahead, I'm going to check on dinner, I'll catch you later. I want them all in the bathroom. We've talked about why on other things. It's really 101 stuff. I mean, if the inspection matters, why wouldn't you want them in the bathroom? So we want them all there. Pretty much common sense, Jeff. Just give it about 10 seconds of thought and you'll come to the same conclusion if it's something you're not sure about. So we want them all there. Trust me on that. And so this is how we do it. And this intent statement works really well. And a couple things. I would recommend saying it as it's written. This is something I would memorize verbatim. I wouldn't try to put it in my own words, because usually that means lengthen it significantly from my experience. And so I would just, if I was going out tonight, I would say it the way it is written, because it works. It's short and concise. And I've been using this in Rebath for over 6 years. It works. I mean, it's proven on thousands of sales calls at closing rates extremely high, over 50%. And the intent statement works. And some of you who are using it already, you already know that. So real quickly, let's talk about some common questions. How long should it take to say the intent statement? Going through that whole statement usually takes around 90 seconds, depending on how fast you talk. Could be a little longer, could be a little bit shorter. So it's not very long. If you put it in your own words, what I've found is when salespeople say, good news, David, I have made the intent statement mine. And I say, well, what does that mean? Well, I put it in my own words so it sounds like me. And then when I hear it, every single time, that is, usually it gets to around 4 minutes. I mean, it grows significantly, and we don't want that. So have you ever had salespeople put it in their own words so it sounds like them? I have, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. We don't care about it sounding like you. And the reason people normally put it in their own words is because of the next question people often ask about this. If I memorize this, you don't understand, David, if I memorize it, it'll sound like a scripted statement. It'll be unnatural. It'll sound like I'm a robot. And that might be true if you're a bad presenter, right? I mean, we all watch movies, and you know those most movies are not improv. They're reading a script, they memorized it, internalized it, and then they say it. And none of us, if you have a good actor, I mean, even my little kids are in. My little kids were just in Charlie Brown, little play. My kids are 9, and my son's 9. He was Snoopy in Charlie Brown, and he could do this. He memorized a bunch of lines, and it didn't sound like a robot, and it didn't sound unnatural. And he was playing a dog, right? He was playing Snoopy. He can do it, and if he can do it, you can too, right? So that's just presentation skills. If it sounds robotic, that's on you. What's the best way to learn the intent statement? I would go through it in those paragraphs. I would memorize it. So I would say it out loud a bunch of times, looking at it, and then I would try to put it away and go through it a section at a time, being able to say it without looking at it. For most people, this takes about 30 minutes to an hour to learn this, so it's solid. It doesn't take very long. It flows very naturally. And as you get into it, because you preview what you're going to do, and then you do it, right? So very, very simple to do. So I want to end our time before I open up with questions, which with a little case study, low compliance rates. And I want to throw some questions at you just to think about. We'll talk through them briefly here before we open it up for questions. And that is Ron, a new salesperson at Rebath on your team, needs your help. He's having a hard time getting potential customers to go into the bathroom for the inspection. And he wonders, does it even matter if they go into the bathroom for the inspection. Like we talked about, it does. And one of the biggest reasons why you would tell Ron is, or I would tell him, is because you're going to position yourself as an expert in there, but even more than that, that buying criteria. You're going to go into their bathroom and help them define what they want in a new solution and the criteria that they're going to use to judge you and every other option. And so, boy, you want them in there for that. The inspection matters so much. If you don't do a good inspection, it always decreases sales. And so you got to tell Ron, we need him in there. Just trust me on that. If there are two homeowners and only one goes into the bathroom for the inspection, Ron wants to know what's likely to happen at the close. And you all know this, right? Unless this is your first day at Rebath. If you have two homeowners and one of them doesn't go in and one does, which one of those two is more likely to be on your team, wanting to move forward at the close? The one who was in the inspection or the one who didn't show up? Well, you know the answer. It's the one who was in the inspection, right? Exactly. So that's always a problem. If one of them is not in the inspection, the likelihood of closing that individual is low. And I've had people who have said, David, I violated this, and that's exactly what happens. I mean, it's pretty much predictable. You know who's going to be more challenging to get on board, the person who wasn't in the inspection. And what do you even do when they resist going in the bathroom? When people say things to you, we'll end with this, like, there's two homeowners, Bob and Sue says, you know what? I'm going to go check on the score of the game and meet you back at the table when you guys are done. You and Bob go in the bathroom. I'll catch you later. Or Bob says, I'm going to go check on dinner and I'll catch up with you later. You and Sue go ahead, right? What do you say? Real quickly, the thing I found that works the best for this, and it's so easy, is you never get confrontational. You never say, I need you both in there, or this isn't going to work. No, what you do is you've been setting up your laptop or tablet, right, during this time. And at no time did you ever go, hey, I'm done setting up my laptop. No, you've been having casual conversation with the warm up and then the discovery, but your laptop was still there. And so if someone says that, like, hey, I'm going to go check on dinner, you guys go ahead and I'll catch up with you later, you're like, oh, no worries. Actually, there's a few more things here I have to set up on the computer, but go ahead and check on dinner. I'll finish what I'm doing. When you're ready, come on back, and then we'll all go in and do the inspection. That simple. So if someone says to you, I'm going to go check on the game, you and Bob go ahead, and I'll catch up with you guys later. Oh, no worries. Go ahead and check on the game. I have a few more things here I need to set up so I can show you later on. So go ahead and check on the game. When you're ready, come on back, and then we'll all go into the bathroom together. And then I would turn my head and look at the computer and start typing stuff and setting things up, right? And that works every time, non-confrontational. You clearly draw a line in the sand. No one gets upset. They go, okay, I guess I'll go check on that. They'll come back. We'll all go in the bathroom. You must have them go in the bathroom. If not, the closing rates always go down and you lose sales that should have been yours. So this is absolutely mission critical. So that's what we would tell Ron in this scenario, what to do. And if you use that strategy, it works. No one ever gets upset. And it works almost every single time, unless you're dealing with someone really an extreme individual. So that's the discovery. What matters about it, those questions. The thing I think most people need to work on in the discovery is understanding the questions and then asking good second level questions. The biggest weakness I see with the intent statement, the biggest thing I see is just not using it or not memorizing it. So you forget parts of it, or you say things like it doesn't feel like me and whatever that means. And so just use the intent statement. That's a pretty straightforward thing. And if you do those two things, you're really setting yourself up for success in the inspection and the rest of the sale. So these are very preliminary steps in our sales process, but boy, do they matter. And so pay attention to them and practice them. Practice, 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 so it gets really smooth. And good news is, practicing the discovery and the intent statement doesn't take long. You can master all of it in a matter of hours. So if you're not there right now, I would encourage you to invest the time into it, knowing that most people won't, and that alone will separate you from the rest of the pack who have other more important things than making money to focus on. And God bless them as they do those endeavors, right? So with that, let me open it up to all of you to see if there's any questions that you have. You can submit them. So Wendy, we have any questions on the discovery or the intent statement?
Not quite yet, but as a reminder, you guys, on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a questions box. So go ahead and type in those questions right now, and we can ask them to David. Any last thoughts, David, while we're waiting for some questions to come
Sure.
in?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think and this is all pretty straightforward stuff. I think so. The biggest thing is, really working on it and really investing the time into it. So if you want to change your sales outcomes and you want to improve closing rates, something has to change, right? You got to invest some time in. You got to change your behaviors. And so I think the biggest thing I found, as I've already alluded to, for people is everyone wants to be successful. And I think I've said this a couple times before, but it's always good to remind all of us, including myself, everyone wants to be successful, and you wouldn't be on this call if you don't want to be successful. So you are the highly motivated of the highly motivated. So that's wonderful. But what really matters is not what you want; it's what you work for. And boy, does that matter. And it's really neat when I see people who take some of this training and they just work at it, they implement it. And it's always sad when I see people who say, "Yeah, no, we haven't been practicing it like we should be," and yeah, I know it would work, but we just been busy, and they have excuses. And the question is, are you stronger than your excuses? Most people are not. Most of their excuses are stronger than their will. So they bow to the excuse. I'm busy, and any other excuse. That's why I know I should. I know I should. I know it would work. That's backed by science. I get it. I get it. I've just been so busy. There's so much going on, right? Life is so busy. We got a lot of leads. We got other problems, and it's just, are you stronger than those excuses? And so I would encourage you, do that. Put in the work, because boy, all the resources that Rebath has right now for selling, it's awesome, right? I mean, some of the virtual learning, some of the new stuff Dana's putting out, some of the things that are coming down the pipeline too in the next few months, really neat resources that you're going to love. But none of it matters if you don't use it. And by use it, I mean practice it, put the hours in. So boy, I would just encourage you. You know what? Do what most people don't, and you'll experience success that most people don't ever experience. And boy, the opportunity is there. What a great company! So many great franchisees I've met over the last couple of years, and boy, just wonderful people in Remath, and a great product, a great company, all these great value propositions, and we squander them because we're lazy. So if that describes you, use this as a wake-up call, and put time in, not just on this, but on all of this, right? You control your sales results, and if your results aren't what they could or should be, or what others are achieving in Remath, then you can fix that. It's your problem. You can fix it. And it's just putting in the time. And so be stronger than those excuses that are keeping you from doing it. And if you do that, good things are just around the corner. I promise. Good things, amazing things are around the corner if you do that.
Well, it looks like, David, you were super thorough. That was a great ending statement. So thank you so much for your time today, and we'll speak to you again in August for our next sales training webinar.
Excellent. Thank you, Wendy. And thank you to everyone who listened, and looking forward to seeing great things as you implement these strategies.
Awesome. So again, everyone, I want to remind you that this session was recorded, and we will be posting it on RB Academy earlier in August. If you do need a copy now, please email me at training@rebathcorp.com, and I will get that right over to you this afternoon. Please take a few minutes to complete the brief survey that will be sent to you once this webinar ends. Have a great rest of your week, and thank you so much for your participation in the Skills Training Sales webinar. This concludes today's session.